You're listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, brought to you by the Raven Creek Social Club, where we talk about faith and other oddities. For questions, comments, or to be part of the conversation, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find us at Raven Creek SC. Now for your hosts, Emily Dixon and Nathan Underwood.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to Faith and Other Oddities, the show where Emily and I read the Bible, talk about it, and release it into the wild via the internet. And so we're back doing that today, and it's been an interesting week.
It's flown by.
Well, it's been kind of weird for me. My allergies hit me on Monday, so if my voice sounds a little off today, that's why. Try not to cough into the mic too much. But
welcome to Oklahoma, where it's always allergy season.
yeah, it's just, sometimes they really get me, but yeah, so I'm feeling mostly okay. I just have some residual stuff. So
I'm like
but
having
everyone,
a Princess Bride moment in my head here. He's mostly dead.
Mostly dead, yeah. So, well, when I put in my sick request, for a sick day, it has your reason for time off, and I almost put functionally dead, but I just went with productivity not possible. Allergies killing me.
Well,
So our administrator has a pretty good sense of humor.
well, he has to. He works with you, and let's face it. Anytime you work with large groups of children, if you don't have a sense of humor, you're pretty much going to hurt somebody, probably yourself. So
Fair enough. Well, all that being said, I know everyone's here to hear about my allergies and all that. But, pray for me out there that I'll make it through the winter. It's been really dry here, so that's been part of it. So but
we're
anyhow,
having the exact opposite. So
well,
yeah.
I mean, up until recently, we did get some rain. So this
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah, we've gotten plenty of it here, so it's amazing what a few hours can mean. So, few hours, some topography changes. So, anyhow, but yeah, we're in 2 Samuel 17 still. We're kind of wrapping up that chapter. Last week we kind of did a family tree of David's troops versus Absalom's troops, and we're actually going to continue with even more family togetherness. I would not recommend this as a way to have a family reunion or, to work out problems within your family. But actually, this is pretty common in the ancient world that, when you're fighting someone, it was typically another family member. And so, because everybody wanted the same stuff. They couldn't just go out and, make a new home someplace else. They wanted the same piece of land. They wanted the same city. They want, all of this stuff. They want the same stuff. So we still got a lot of family togetherness. We're actually in verse 27, which is, I think it's almost the next to the last verse of this chapter, which was
2 Samuel 17:27.
Yep, that's where we're picking
for
up.
anyone for all those playing at home.
Right. So verse 27 opens up when David came to Mahanaim. Let's try that again. When David came to
We're going to get this?
I don't know if we're going to get this. Mahanaim. There we go. Mahanaim. Oh my goodness. It's been one of those weeks. So I kind of foresaw this being a problem when...
There's a whole group of people who actually found this stuff in actual print, so you don't have to rely on your handwriting, right?
I know. Well, it's not even my handwriting. I have no. This is how high my stress levels have been this week. I have been messing up regular, plain old English words, and I know it's just stress. And so I was hoping that podcasting it wouldn't. So Mahanaim is the place where David has come to, and he has set up camp there, which is appropriate because the name actually means two camps. We first encountered this back in Genesis 32:3, and this is where Jacob wrestled with the angel. And so this is the place where he divided his family into two camps, and he sent half ahead to meet Esau and the rest stayed behind to come with him later. And so it's kind of fitting that now we're looking at another family rivalry because David is fighting his son, that we're back at this spot and that this has significance beyond just the fact that it's a convenient place to stop. Now, let's be honest, convenient places to stop were often the most utilized places. So, sometimes, yes, there's a definite theological significance. And sometimes it's just like, it's this convenience store as you're coming into town that's just convenient to whip into. So you stop there. I think that's one of the hard things with the Bible is trying to figure out how much to read into it and how much to just go, oh, this is people. So
Sure.
anyhow, but the verse continue, and we're told that David's joined by this really interesting group. The first person in the list is Shobi, son of Nakash, and he's from Rabbah of the Amorites. If you remember, not that long ago, that Joab had destroyed the city, had captured the city of Rabbah. And that was the place where Joab was fighting when David was doing all the things with Bathsheba he shouldn't have been doing. So it's really interesting that Shobi of Rabbah, son of Nakash, is there with David at this time when David is getting ready to be overthrown, because Shobi lived in Rabbah. He lived in the city that Joab had just captured. This also means that Shobi is a brother to Hanun, the one that Joab had just defeated. He's also a brother to Abigail, which was the mother of Ither. Remember, he's in this group here. Zuriah, mother of Joab. So we have this really weird family connection going on. So Shobi, this makes Shobi a cousin to both Ither and Joab. So basically what this is turning into is a great big family feud. Now, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodabar.
Well,
now,
it kind of started that way anyhow.
it did, but it makes sense, because what happens whenever there's a something going on in the family? You get your two people who are involved in the initial conflict, right? And then they go to their person that they trust in the family, and they tell the story of how it happens, and then that person in the family takes their side, and then the other person goes to another person and tells their story, and then it just kind of spreads until you do get this division within a family. Instead of, the two people just working it out together, sitting down and talking about it and refusing to talk bad about each other behind each other's backs. And I know I'm guilty of this. You and I are like the two closest ones in the family, so we're often the ones we grumble to. But I will say, I think we do a good job of acknowledging, hey, this is what we're dealing with, and versus, oh, I just can't stand them. So, and trying to come up with proactive ways to deal with each other, and sometimes, even checking ourselves, am I out of line? So,
Right. And oftentimes the things we discuss with one another, they don't go anywhere else. They just
Right.
stay with us.
Exactly.
So it's not like it's not like we're going to the local gossip mill to be like, oh, I better tell this person so that everyone else will hear it.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we really have to work on as believers. What's the difference between just grumbling about a situation and seeking wise counsel? And, I think one of the things we need to do is we need to find wise counsel, and don't let that inflate your ego too much. But somebody who's familiar with the situation and somebody who knows the other people you're dealing with, to be able to say, yes, this is how this person is, or this is what this person does, and how are you going to deal with it? Is it wise to deal with it in any sort of way, or do you just let the chips fall where they may? And so there's a lot of negativity in the Christian culture about things like counseling, because, oh, well,
Mhm.
now you're just looking for someone to complain to. You're looking for someone to validate your viewpoint. First of all, if that's what your counselor is doing, is just validating your viewpoint, you've got a lousy counselor. You need to find a new one.
Sure.
And so, we look for people that we can trust to talk to, not to stir up trouble, but sometimes so we can just sort through the muck in our own head. And so, sometimes that can get out of line. Sometimes that can become, seeking self-validation or seeking validation from others. That's not a good thing. But I only brought that up because so often in families there is this ripple effect where it starts, like I said, with those two, and it just progresses out. And I think one of our obligations is to find ways to protect the family. And
Right. Well, and there's that, and one of the things I just sorry, I think I might have cut off the end of your point, but one of the things that is I've noticed is that when you get in a lot of churches that tend to be controlling,
mhm,
they're the ones who tend to really harp on number one, counseling,
mhm,
and number two is they have very strict anti-gossip policies,
mhm,
which basically means you can't tell someone about a problem you're having, specifically if it involves someone in church
mhm,
leadership.
mhm,
And so, if you're at a place where if they tell you you're gossiping because you're sharing your story, you're trying to get help with an issue,
mhm.
that's something you need to watch out for, because there are times when we do need to go and seek someone for some wisdom in a situation, and
Yeah.
that's just something I wanted to kind of throw out there, because if you're talking about your situation and something that happened to you,
Mhm.
that's not gossip.
No, it's not.
And I mean, and people want to say, well, that's not evidence either. But the thing is, whenever you go into a court, evidence is considered, an eyewitness is
Mhm.
considered evidence. So if
Yeah.
something happened to you, that's evidence of things happening. And it's
Yeah.
not gossip to seek help if you were hurt and need to know how to handle a situation.
Well, I mean, not to get too specific, and I don't want to get too derailed on this. When my ex-husband was being abusive, I was told by not very many, I have to point that out, but there were at least a couple of people who told me I was being disrespectful to my husband. I wasn't honoring him by seeking help in our marriage. Okay, that's bunk. So don't let somebody tell you that you're being disrespectful for seeking ways to deal with woundings that you're dealing with. And
Right.
so, that's somebody who's more worried about reputation and ego than they are about the truth. And here's the thing, God's reputation isn't reliant on us protecting it. We don't need to protect God's reputation. We need to be worried about the truth because that's what he's about. And so,
Right.
it's not going to make God look bad if you tell on leadership or if you report leadership. That's not making God look bad, and nobody should use that as a way to guilt you into silence. So,
Mhm.
anyway, I know we bring these issues up a lot, but I mean, I they just mean a
Well,
lot to me.
and I think it's important because we get so much overwhelming message from the other side.
Mhm.
And there is I was listening to, I think they changed the name to the Bear Marriage podcast, Sheila Gregoire.
Oh, okay.
Um and they were talking about some similar things. And so if you ever want some resources and encouragement about reporting things, definitely check them out.
Oh, yeah.
There was something specific I was going to reference, but I
She's
got
solid.
halfway there and forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, her stuff is solid, so I mean, she's not affiliated with us in any way, shape, or form, but we support her work, and so we do think she's a good resource for people, and I really want people to not only take advantage of what she's done and use it as a way to help you, but also, check her out, listen to her podcast, read her post on Facebook, follow her. She's to Love, Honor, and Vacuum, and share her stuff and just really get her work out there because I think it's important for the health of a lot of Christian marriages there's a lot of stuff out there that's bad advice for Christian marriages in particular. So,
Yeah, and one other thing I just want to tack on, and I know this has very little to do with the text, it just kind of is where the conversation's gone, is, I was talking to Mickey about some things the other day, and she was saying that, growing up, she was, and this is, I know, a lot of church people would say, you shouldn't be mad at people, and you shouldn't, bring things up because, love keeps no record of wrong.
hmm
And they would use, a lot of people would use that as a way to excuse, well, I've done that and it was terrible, but you should just get over it.
right,
Um, is kind of the way they would go about things, and it's like, well, there's a difference between keeping a record of wrong and tending wounds.
right. Right.
It's a lot different, those are
And,
two very different things.
and we know that in the physical realm. And so often what God has given us in the physical realm actually mirrors what goes on in the spiritual and the emotional realm. And so, if somebody stabs you, you're going to go get that taken care of, and there's going to be a scar. And to think that there wouldn't be a scar from an emotional or a mental or a spiritual wound is ridiculous.
Right.
So, but okay, so back to 2 Samuel 17. We've got Shobi, and then we have Machir, son of Amiel, and he's from Lodabar. And we met him back when it's in chapter 9. It's whenever David was trying to figure out, are there any people left from the house of Saul? And we find out that Machir was the one providing a home for Mephibosheth. And so his appearance here is surprising because we would have been tempted to think that anyone who provided a home for Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson, would have been a supporter of the house of Saul and would have, supported even Mephibosheth's claim to the throne. That's not the case. So we're seeing where his allegiances lie. Barzillai, which I think somebody needs to name their child that, the Gileadite from Rogelim. We don't know much about him from this passage. His name means man of iron. We later learn that he is wealthy. We're going to encounter him again later. Now, the last time we encountered a Gileadite was in Judges with Jephthah. And remember, Jephthah made the rash vow to sacrifice the next thing he saw if he won the battle, and it happened to be his daughter. And so we aren't real familiar with them. That we do believe that this is a geographic descriptor, that this is, they're from Gilead. So very popular place in the Bible. And we only have 2 mentions of Regalim, and both are in reference to Barzillai. And it means literally the place of the fullers. Now, fuller can have 2 definitions. One is a fuller is somebody who cleans clothes. But the second is it's part of the blacksmithing process. Particularly, there's a fuller hammer, and it's used to spread iron or to put grooves in it. I haven't done this with iron. I've got to do a similar process with silver. It's a very precise and exacting skill. So if you're good at it, then you have a marketable skill. Now, I tend to go with the second definition because Barzillai's name actually means man of iron. So it makes sense. And then also, if you look at the idea of he's rich, he's from a city of fullers, he's a man of iron. This guy probably provided weapons and armor for soldiers, for warriors. So,
Sure.
So we've got these 3 guys. So we've got an Amorite, we have a supporter of Saul, and we have a man of Gilead. Now, the thing about him being from Gilead, this is where Absalom was camped with Israel. And he's also a potential, like I said, armorer or swordsmith. So by joining David rather than Absalom, it really, none of these people make sense. They don't seem to make sense on the surface level of things, because David had just decimated and captured Shobi's hometown. He had taken the throne from Saul, who obviously Machir supported, and then even leaving his home, Barzillai put himself in danger from Absalom. So if we're just looking for logistical reasons for these guys to join him, it's really not apparent, not from the text anyway. And the only reason why they might have joined David is because they are loyal to him and they believe he is the rightful king of Israel. Now, the previous verse, when we talked last week, gave us parallels between David and Absalom. Here we have dissimilarity. So the previous verse we had, the two generals who were cousins, and their mothers both being the daughters of Nakash. And we talked about how those kind of lined up. Now, in this verse, like I said, we got the dissimilarities. Absalom has Israel. David has this group of unlikely supporters who are actually not of Israel itself, which is really kind of interesting, because you would think that God's chosen and anointed king over Israel would be bringing followers from that nation, when we have the exact opposite. And I think this speaks to the later inclusion of the Gentile into the church. I mean, I don't want to go too deep with that, but I think it demonstrates how the good news and the promises of the Bible have been through for all people throughout time if they're willing to join with God's purposes. It wasn't exclusive to the nation of Israel. That's where it started, and that's where it was protected and preserved, and that was their honor and duty, but it was not something that they were supposed to hoard to themselves. And I think
Right. Well, there's.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I just
Go finish what you're saying.
I think we see evidence throughout Scripture of how people did see the truth of what Israel had and valued and honored that to join Israel. So
Yeah. Well, and also I think there's an aspect of this here where you have people who are not of Israel, who are not of God's elect nation,
mhm,
who are seeing David as a good king,
mhm,
and so they're you're looking at people other kings getting involved in foreign policy, going, "Hey, we'd rather have David on the throne than that guy,
right.
than his son." And so, and you're seeing people recognize the goodness of David, and David's supposed to be a type of the Messiah.
Mhm,
So when people, even who are not of the elect crowd of Israel, see
right.
David's goodness, they follow him.
Mhm,
And so, I think that's kind of our, it might be one of those images of, hey, even the sinful quote unquote nations can recognize the goodness of David, who's supposed
mhm,
to foreshadow Jesus here.
mhm.
Maybe that should tell us something. Maybe the Gentiles later are going to be able to see the goodness that Jesus puts forth into the world. And so, anyway, that's kind of what I'm seeing there.
Well, yeah, and the fact that God's mercy and God's blessing and God's goodness is on display for others through the keeping of the Torah, through the honoring of God's word. I mean, that's huge, and that's a major point of witness, and the fact that yes, you don't have to be part of the quote unquote elect, which in the Old Testament Israel is the elect, but you can actually join with the elect. And again, we've talked about that in other places in Samuel, where we see these outsiders who have joined with Israel and said, "This is something I want to be a part of," and willingly choosing to renounce their old affiliations and family and nationality status in order to join with what God is doing on the earth. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think we can carry these principles on over into the New Testament because that's what the point is. This is why we have these stories, and this is why the New Testament writers refer back to the Old Testament so often, and why Paul says all scripture is profitable. He didn't say, well, except for that one part. But anyway, verse 28 through 29, we're told that these guys bring to the people beds, basins, earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched corn, grain, beans, lentil, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese. Um, so we get this list, this very expansive list that actually exceeds anything. Remember, oh my goodness, I lost his name. But before, let me turn Ziva. Ziva has showed up. He didn't have nearly this much. He brought this to David. And then when Abigail brought provision to David, not nearly this much. I mean, these guys are bringing the goods. They bring beds. So they are helping them get entrenched for a long, drawn out conflict. And so what we need to realize about this is a direct reversal of the wilderness journey in Israel and in Exodus. At that time, when we're talking about the Exodus, the other nations refused to allow the nation of Israel passage, and they refused to allow Israel to have any food, to provide any kind of sustenance for the people. And now these men who are bringing food to David and the people without being asked, they're giving from a place of compassion and they're affirming David's right to rule. So we have this full reversal where these outsiders, instead of saying, we don't want anything to do with you, are coming in and saying, hey, we want to be a part and we want to help take care of you. And that this is one of the essence, or one of the primary aspects of David's story is he both mimics and reverses the Israelite journey. And of course, we're going to see aspects of that in Jesus' story too. And so when you've got David, wandering out, I mean, he leaves Jerusalem, he wanders out into the wilderness, he crosses over the Jordan. We have all these wonderful parallels that says, hey, you need to pay attention because there's this microcosm of Israel's history as a nation being played out in this one man. And this one man is actually going to be what brings in those outsiders to offer this kind of support and this kind of care. And then, of course, with the ministry of Jesus, we see this just explode. What David does in a very small way becomes something that's literally global. So now we're moving into chapter 18. And so David's had a chance to regroup. He's got a time to kind of think. He's got time to make his plans. And he has run long enough. And so we're told in verse 1 that David mustered the men who were with him and set them over the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. So during Absalom's rebellion, people had defected from David's side. I mean, we obviously saw that with Ahithophel. I mean, he was one of David's trusted advisors. He goes and joins Absalom. We've got people who, are clearly on David's side. We got people who are clearly on Absalom's side. We have people who are rooting for Saul's house, like we saw with Shimei. David doesn't know who he has. At this point, trying to figure out exactly who is remaining, who's left, who's joined him, this is a big question. And the only thing we do know is that Absalom has Israel. David has this little group that's left Jerusalem with him. So the people in the city, which remember, not everybody from the city joined him, but the people from the city are certainly not going to number anywhere close to the people of Israel who've joined Absalom. So organizing his troops, coming up with divisions and setting them into some kind of structure makes very logical sense. And I think the other thing we need to remember is this didn't happen in the time it takes to read this. This was
Right.
something that was spread out over who knows how many months. Tradition says 6 months. The scripture doesn't give us that exact of a number, but the idea that it was a protracted event, it was not just a few hours, it wasn't a few days, it wasn't even just a few weeks. It probably did last a few months, especially when you consider the logistics in moving armies of this size. And Absalom's moving a considerable army. I mean, even just rallying the army, sending messengers to say, hey, Absalom's king now. Are you guys going to join him or not? I mean, that's going to take 3 or 4 days. And then people are going to think about it for a few days. And then they're going to have to pack. I mean, when you just think about what it would take to gather that army, now you know that it has to take some time. Now, the possibility, one of the possibilities that this time opens up is that there's a good chance that Absalom's followers are becoming disillusioned with Absalom. Because think about who Absalom's primary, most important supporter was. It's Ahithophel. Now, if Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather, and one of his rallying cries to get people to join behind Absalom instead of David is to point out David's sin with Bathsheba and to talk about what a horrible king he was and how he couldn't be trusted. And then Absalom's first move is to rape David's concubines. You've got to imagine there's some conflict in people's perceptions about Absalom. And this would definitely lead to disillusionment. And, we can look at today's politics, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but when we're told that a politician stands for one thing, and then he gets into the office and does the exact opposite, people get disillusioned. And they begin to regret, electing that official. And so to say that there was a potential for disillusionment here, I think is an understatement. So, especially now that Ahithophel, the one who had rallied so many people to Absalom's side, has gone and killed himself. That's how hopeless he thinks the situation is. So there's a lot of stuff going on that you don't really think about unless you pause and bring in all of these previous verses and all of these little events that have happened in the past, because now we aren't even talking about Ahithophel, but his influence is still there. Why? Because he is Absalom's primary, or was Absalom's primary advisor. So the other thing we've got to remember too is David is facing superior forces, superior numbers. I mean, if David is going to make a strategic attack against Absalom, he's got to do some planning. And I think one of the things that people kind of shy away from is planning, is counting, it's thinking about what the future possibilities need to be, how to handle a situation, and we go, oh, we're just walking on faith. I think there's totally a time to just walk in faith, that you don't know the next step and you're just doing the best you can in the moment. But that doesn't mean we turn off our brain. It doesn't mean we stop thinking, we stop planning, we stop using the gifts God has given us. And we're actually going to jump into Psalm 20 before too long. And the opening part of the opening lines of that, or sorry, not opening, but in there it talks about, may God fulfill all your plans. And so when we talk about this is not a bad thing to plan. Now, where people get confused is later on in David's story, there's going to be a time when David numbers his troops, and this is going to cause problems. And we'll get into that story later. This is a very famous story. And so when they see David numbering his troops, counting the men who are with him here, they want to read from that story back into the story. There's no judgment call here. There's absolutely nothing that says this is the wrong move to make. So, verse 2a, David divides his army. I'm not going to read it, but he divides it into thirds. He divides it into Joab, under Joab, and then under Abishai, Joab's brother, and then Ittai the Gittite. So we know Joab. We know that he is David's primary general. We know that he led the army at Rabbah. He carried out the command to kill Uriah without blinking. We know that he killed Abner, even whenever Abner was in talks with David to join David. We know that he arranged for Absalom to come home and that he employed that strategy, that very complex strategy with the wise woman of Tekoa. So we know Joab. We kind of know how he thinks. We kind of know the methodology that this man is going to use. And we know that he, above all, can be trusted on the battlefield. And we know that he always does what he thinks is right for David. Even if David may not agree, Joab is the guy who's going to push to do what he thinks is right, because he doesn't care what David thinks. He's not intimidated by David. He is always looking beyond what David is seeing, or what David is allowing emotion to cloud his judgment over. And this is going to become very important in the story. We met Abishai back in 1 Samuel 26:6. This is the second time that David spared Saul's life. And Abishai was ready to kill Saul at that moment, and David stopped him. He was with with Joab at the Battle of Gibeon, which is where the whole thing went down that led to Joab killing Abner. And he was with David whenever Shimei had cursed David. So he's been around a while. We also know that when he shows up, he wants to kill somebody. This seems to be like the repetitive theme with this guy. He doesn't really care about anything else. He just wants somebody to die. Ittai the Gittite, he joined David earlier when David left Jerusalem, and he brought his family, he brought troops, and so he joins David. David tried to dissuade him, and he stayed with David, and now he becomes one of the three leading generals that follow David. So verse 2b, and the king said to the men, I myself will go out with you. Will also go out with you. So the wording here is interesting, because David doesn't offer to lead. He's put these guys in charge, and he's kind of stepped back, and he's saying, I'm not going to go out and lead over you. I'm going to go out with you. And there's a possibility here that he's actually saying, I'm just going to go out like another soldier. I'm going to go and fight. You guys take care of the logistics. I'm going to go fight. And so that's kind of unusual for a king to say. Now, on one level, it makes absolute sense. David's been out of the warlord game for a while as far as actually being involved in the battle. He has been part of, running the politics, making sure the diplomatic duties are met, doing all the things a king does. He hasn't been swinging a sword. He's pretty much turned the military over to Joab at this point. And we saw that at Rabbah. Remember, Joab had to say, get out here unless you want all the credit to go to me. And so, from that perspective, it totally makes sense that David would actually say, I'm going to step back and just be a fighter here and let you guys handle logistics. So, verse 3, but the man said, you shall not go out. But the men said, you shall not go out. For if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore, it is better that you send us help from the city. So, a couple of different reasons for the guys saying this have been suggested. And one of them is that David's just too old, that due to his age, it's probably not a good idea for him to join them on the battlefield. That's one possibility. I mean, he's definitely not a young man at this point. We really don't know what his age is because the Bible doesn't really care about giving us those specifics. But a second reason, and I tend to lean towards this, is that what the men are saying is actually true. If you remember Ahithophel's original plan to stop all this, to make sure that Absalom became king, it had one major component: kill the king. Not get into a fight with everyone else, not to try to take on David's armies. Kill David. If you kill David, his armies will scatter, and then Absalom becomes the de facto king. I mean, he's the heir apparent. He's the guy who wins the battle. And so putting David on the field is actually dangerous, not just to David, who is obviously a major target, but it's dangerous to the stability of Israel and Jerusalem. It could actually unravel the kingdom completely. So to stop that from happening, keeping David at home, keeping him safe in a city would actually make sense. So I don't think we need to go much further than that because, I mean, yeah, he might have been old, but I mean, good grief, Moses was still leading the children of Israel at 120. Age
Sure.
really doesn't matter in these stories. And one of the things that's so often said about these biblical leaders is that they continue to be strong, that, the light has not diminished in their eyes. That at these great ages, they were still considered to be fearsome warriors. So I really don't see age being so much of a factor at this point as I do that it just makes sense.
Right.
So, verse 4, the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood beside the gate while the army marched out by hundreds and by thousands. Now, the sages say this is when David composed Psalm 20, and we'll get into that. But I want to look at a few things that are happening in this verse before we get there. So, number one, David's heeding the advice of his generals. He will do whatever literally is good in their eyes. Now, it's interesting that at this point in time, when this phrase is used, that rather than what's good in their eyes is to take advantage of or to abuse or, just forget God. In this moment, what's right in the general's eyes is to protect God's anointed. And so that's not something we have seen very often, that the intent or the purpose of doing something that's right in their eyes is actually a good thing. It's a selfless thing because
Now,
go ahead.
question: Are the generals, are these those Gentile leaders that you were referring to earlier?
This is actually this is Joab, his brother Abishai, and Ittai. Now Ittai
Oh,
was
okay.
not.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people to keep track of here.
Well, we've got a battle. I mean, a whole nation's involved in a civil war. And which, again, in case you forgot, this is going back to that last part of Judges, where when the Levite and the concubine and the abuse of a woman leads to a civil war, it's
Right.
following the same pattern. And so when you have a civil war, I mean, you do have a lot of people to keep track of. And so Ittai the Gittite, we talked about him. We don't know whether or not he was an Israelite who lived in the area of Gath, or if he was actually someone from Gath. So there's some debate on that, and feel free to go back and reference that episode. You edited it, you should remember, but go back and reference that episode. The second thing is we're told David sits beside the gate as the troops go out. Now, this is the same place that Eli sat whenever he received word that the troops had captured, that the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant. Now, again, we're having another reversal here. What's very interesting, in Eli's case, Eli was sitting at the gate, not when the troops went out, but when they were coming back in. And we've got to remember that in Eli's story, his sons took the Ark of the Covenant out into battle as a talisman, as a good luck charm to ensure victory. Where David, at the beginning of the story, what was one of the first things that happened when he left Jerusalem? The priest bring the Ark of the Covenant. And David said, no, you take it back. You put it back where it belongs. And he refused to use the Ark of the Covenant as that talisman. And so we've got some similarities immediately, but there's similarities that are dissimilar. They're opposites. They're the reversals. And, Eli was told that his sons died in battle. And when he was told about his sons, it's kind of like, meh, whatever. But when he's told about the Ark of the Covenant, he actually falls over beside the gate and dies. He breaks his neck at that point. Now, because we have those reversals, there's something going on here that is very interesting, because we're seeing that David is superior to the judges that had once ruled. Eli dies, of course, and David is protected from death. We're gonna find that, but what we're getting is a sense of anticipation. We should be realizing that something massive is going on, because David is leading in the right way. David is leading how God's chosen leader should lead, as opposed to Eli. And we already know that one of the problems with Eli was that he wouldn't keep his sons in line. He wouldn't make sure that they did what was proper and appropriate. And what was their major sin? Well, they're eating the sacrifices, but they're also abusing the women who serve at Shiloh, the place of worship at that point in time. What's Absalom done? He has taken the city of Jerusalem and he's abused David's wife. So again, we have more points of connection. It's David's son Absalom, or even Amnon, versus Eli's sons. And so what we're seeing here is the question of what kind of leader is David going to be, and how's that being presented in his sons? Can he turn it around? Can he actually be better than Eli in every respect? Or is it just going to be this one aspect of sending the ark back, making sure that the ark isn't abused? And so we see these patterns build to show us that we need to be looking for something bigger and greater. We need to be looking for an improvement. We need to be trying to see where people aren't going to be stuck in the way things were done in a previous generation. Are they actually following God, or are they being bound to the restraints and the cultural conditioning of their time and place? And so David is starting to make some of these changes. He's starting to get some things right. He's not going to get there completely. And we are going to be able to look at the fact that, David's downfall within Jerusalem after Bathsheba was the fact that he did not discipline his son. He did not discipline Amnon. And now God is stepping in through Absalom, and we're going to talk about how Absalom really is an instrument of God. He's stepping in through Absalom to administer punishment for the fact that David didn't deal with this issue in his own household, just like Eli. So you have your similarities, you have your reversals, and then you come back to these similarities that show that not, you can get things better, you can get things right to a better degree, maybe is the way to say it, but God does not exempt anyone from their sins. God doesn't let anyone get by with stuff. And so when David actually takes the position and he gets dangerously close to mirroring the behaviors of the sons of Eli, both in, he's got the ark, and remember he wanted to build the temple, which God said was a good thing, but God also recognized how that could play into David's pride and his hubris. God puts a stop to it. And then David then abuses the woman Bathsheba, just like Eli's son. So David occupies that dual role there, both of Eli's son and of Eli. And in this moment, he's actually stepping up, and he is occupying the role both of king, judge, and warlord, sending everyone out. And he's starting to realign not just his house, but he's realigning the nation into a proper, what's the word I'm looking for? A proper way of operating, and how it should be, that God's anointed should be on the throne and God's anointed should be leading the nation. And if that means administering justice and discipline to a son, then that's exactly what needs to happen. So now there is something else that's going to happen here that's significant, because in the Hebrew, it doesn't say that either Eli or David fell beside the gate. It says that they fell at the hand of the gate. Now, we aren't going to talk about why that's significant, because to get there, we'd have to skip some stuff in the passage. So just hang on to that little bit of information. We're going to talk about why the hand of the gate is important, because this word's going to come back up. So anyway, verse 5. And the king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard him when the king gave orders to all the commanders concerning Absalom. So David tells his generals how he wants his son dealt with. Deal gently with him. He needs to be stopped, but don't punish him. Don't treat him like you would the average rebel. He's still my son. Now, Brueggemann notes that David makes it he's very careful not to reference the father-son relationship. This is the king speaking. David's trying to hold on to that position of, I am the king giving a command. I'm not just a father being too easy on my kid. So be careful with the young man Absalom. Not, don't hurt my son. That there's a difference there. There's a difference in those two statements. Don't hurt my son versus be gentle with the young man. One's a royal decree. One is a plea of a father. And David chooses to give, the royal decree. And there's a suggestion that maybe David is doing this to separate himself from Absalom's death and saying, I'm not responsible. I asked that they didn't hurt him, so you can't blame it on me. I think that suggestion is reading our modern sensibilities into the text, because he's a rebel. Killing a son who rises up against a father, that's normal. That was just status quo for the day, because it was almost a given that a son would rise up against a father. We've looked at that and throughout so many themes of mythology and history, and we see it over and over again. For a father to put down an uprising against his son and to either completely exile and banish his son or to kill his son, not something that the people really felt, was awful. They figured that it was very much just the way things operated. Because when someone tries to take the throne, you stop it. You use whatever means you have to stop it. So now, the rabbis were really puzzled by this behavior, because in their mind, man, this evil, wicked Absalom has risen up, and he's tried to take Jerusalem, the holy city, and he's touched God's anointed. And how dare he? And this is not a good thing. So why would David extend grace and mercy? Why is he not demanding justice? And one solution, I thought this was actually a pretty good solution, um, is that they say that David understands Absalom's rebellion as that fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy. They say that Absalom really didn't have a choice. And now I don't want to go that far, but let's kind of look at this from the perspective of human nature and human choices within the divine plan. And so their suggestion is because David saw Absalom as the fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy, that David actually took the responsibility for Absalom's actions upon himself. That he saw himself as a stand-in, that Absalom didn't do anything other than attempt to right a wrong that David had done. So therefore, if David had conducted himself properly, Absalom would not have had to act. And if Absalom hadn't acted, then there wouldn't be this rebellion and civil war within the kingdom. Now, I don't know if that's reading too much into the story. It does offer some interesting parallels with Christ, someone who's willing to take responsibility for our bad actions, and somebody who's willing to stand in and say, "Hey, don't punish them for their sins." So, I mean, obviously, I do not believe that Jesus is the one who caused our sins. Like the rabbis are saying, David believed he caused Absalom's sins. But I do believe that there's some parallels that we can play with from that perspective. That the idea of, don't blame them for what they did. Don't hold it against him. Cover him is actually the word. I think it's very interesting that deal gently is actually the idea of covering someone in protection. It's not just a be nice to them. And so it goes a little deeper than just be kind. And so I think that if we took some time and looked at those ideas of covering someone so that they aren't paying for their sins, we could definitely find those parallels within the New Testament and Christ and our relationship and our forgiveness of sins. Now, obviously, David's not going to be able to not going to be able to save his son in an eternal sense. That's beyond any human being. But what he can do is possibly make a way for Absalom to continue to live. And if Absalom continues to live, perhaps there's hope of reconciliation. And if there's hope of reconciliation, then maybe Absalom can be king at some point in the future. Unfortunately, I think most of us know that's not how it works out, and for so many reasons. But again, I have to go, is that reading too much into what's being said here? And now, real quick side note, what I think is interesting is how many times the rabbinic explanations for a person's behavior or actions within these Old Testament narratives are actually very close to providing a Christian understanding of these different principles.
Mhm.
And and if you study any of the rabbinic writing, a lot of times you'll find that this very harsh denouncement of Christianity. And so it kind of cracks me up that the explanations actually bring the text closer to Christianity so often. So, but either way, David is making this decree publicly. I mean, he's not only telling his generals, all the people heard, is what we're told. So there's no excuse for anyone to claim ignorance. And it's also possibly a way to try to put a leash, particularly on Joab and Abishai. Remember, Joab doesn't think anything about killing people he thinks might harm David. We've already seen that. Abishai's the same way. Kill Shimei, kill Saul. They will kill anyone they think is posing some kind of threat to their king. And so maybe by telling them publicly, hey, you need to deal gently, you need to cover my son, then David can say, hey, look, everybody knew what you were supposed to do. Everybody knows how you're supposed to behave. You can't say you didn't know. And this is going to become important in the story. Now, all of this has described what's going to happen as David moves into battle. That's been our setup. And before we move forward in the chapter, I do want to pause and look at Psalm 20 because it's an interesting psalm, and I'm not going to get real deep into it because we don't have a lot of time. But I do want to just kind of in a way of introduction. Almost every commentator who talks about Psalm 20 agrees that the psalm was written either to a king or for a king preceding a battle or some kind of military alliance. And this psalm is something that is speaking probably to a king, and it's coming from internal evidence within the psalm. And so once again, we're going to be facing that question, did David write this? And if David did write it, did he write it for this particular event? But it is a very fitting psalm, not just from the standpoint of reading it before one goes into warfare, but actually praying on behalf of anyone who's facing a crisis moment where the crisis one is facing is so overwhelming and it's so big that the individual or the community can't get through it without God's help. And
Right.
so I think that's the key here. We need to be looking at this story with David going into this battle and recognize that he is completely outnumbered. Him retaking Jerusalem, him retaking Israel at this point, because remember, Absalom has all of Israel with him, is ridiculous. And so when the sages or the rabbis decided that, hey, we're going to attribute this psalm to David, or we're going to build on that tradition that attributes this psalm to David at this point in time, they are basically telling us how dire David's situation is. They're explaining to us that David, by all rights, he should be out of the running at this point. And especially since most of them think that possibly David was too old to actually participate in a battle at this point.
Mhm.
Now, the psalm itself is only 8 verses long. I think maybe 9 verses, depending on which way you're dividing it up. So I do want to encourage, before you join us next week, to take some time to read through that psalm. You might actually find it encouraging, because I think so many of us are looking at life going, "This is too much." I can't handle this. This is overwhelming.
Right.
And and if you've never found yourself in that situation, I want to know your secret for the first part. 2, are you alive? Because I think every believer who is aware of their circumstance and their situation in life has had those moments where, man, you're forced to try to bring the situation into a framework where you can perceive that God is actually working and God is on your side. He hasn't abandoned you. And that's what this psalm is about. And what's really cool about this psalm is there's no critique. There's no lament or complaining about the enemy. There's no complaining about betrayal or warfare. It's just saying this is the place I am. And this is another reason why that psalm was thought to have been written at this point, was because the battle is against somebody that David does love. And so the fact that the enemy isn't, talked about in a negative way is just, this is a point where I need I need a win. I need a win, not because the person is so horrible, but because I have to do this if we're going to survive. So Lord, can you help me? Are you going to be here? Are you going to bless my plans? Are you going to help me fulfill my desires? And I need to hear from you before I proceed. and I need to know that you are actually here with me in this moment. So I'm excited about getting into that psalm, and then of course we'll return to the story of Absalom and Joab and Absalom's death, because we've got some really interesting points on that one. And
Yeah, that's
so
going to be real interesting.
yeah, so I decided to draw it out because I could, and I mean,
Sure. Sure. Well, it helps us get content. So,
well, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. I have been like running around with a chicken with my head cut off and trying
with
to
the chicken with
with
your head cut off.
see, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, who knew? I didn't. I didn't know buying a house and moving was going to be so stressful. Good grief.
Yeah,
So,
it's a big change. Even if you are, even if you've done it before, it doesn't matter. It's always a big change.
oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, we got in here, had our first rainstorm, and the roof started leaking, and it's like, oh, well, that's fun. Um, so just these wonderful little surprises that are coming up.
Yeah,
So,
call your home warranty people.
amen. That's already been done. So, but
Yep.
anyhow,
That's why you have them throw that in for the first year. It's helpful.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So, but there's been good things too, and I know I talked last week about just how grateful I was for the people who've just been excited on my behalf, and and I'm still getting people who are finding out because Facebook's algorithms are weird, and still getting just
Sure.
these really wonderful messages like, "You moved? I'm so excited for you." So that's just been
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, well, it's good. Well, hey, yeah, that seems like a good place to pause, and before jumping to a whole other book.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I'm looking forward to hearing what we have to say about that, because the Psalms are always interesting whenever you
Mhm.
really do a deep dive into them.
Hmm.
But that being said, I guess we'll let everyone go, and we will see everybody next week. In the meantime,
Oh,
hit us up
hey,
on what?
hold up.
Oh,
I
you've got
forgot. Yeah,
information.
yeah, we've got
What?
an episode. I got to be on the commentarians this month.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
out.
yeah, it's out with The Conjuring and Joe, and it's so cool. And we announced on there that Doug Overmeyer with CRC is joining us, and he's got so many more resources when we're talking about haunted houses and ghosts and supernatural experiences, and just all of that fun stuff. So we want y'all guys to be aware that not only can we talk about that spiritual supernatural events with The Conjuring with Joe, which is great, but also there's going to be so many more resources with Doug on CRC, and we are so happy to have him join Raven Creek and be a part of this podcasting network, which has just been stunning. So
Yeah. And it's not completely done. He's not ready to launch, but we will let you know when
he
that
was
happens.
supposed to
We're
be.
excited.
I'm going to tell him I scolded him on air. He was supposed to be, but
Well,
anyway, no.
it happens. I mean, you know as well as anyone.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you get delayed when you're trying to do all your production. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and and that's the great thing about Doug. He's going to know that I'm just giving him a little friendly ribbing, so it's good.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, then, everyone, if you have questions, comments, concerns, even feel free to send them our way, and we'll be glad to take a look at those. Raven Creek SC on all the social media. RavenCreekSC.com is the website. And you can always send us the old-fashioned email at ravencreeksc@gmail.com. If you really want to get in touch with us directly, I do check that email pretty regularly.
I'm
So,
glad you do.
anyway, well, I mean, someone has to. So I guess that's me. And until then, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, a Raven Creek Social Club production. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you like what you've heard, please write us a review on iTunes or consider supporting us on patreon.com/RavenCreekSC. As always, thank you for listening, and don't forget to join us next week.